In this video, I'm going to explain the GCSE French role play in the higher tier. So during the oral exam, the role play is the first part of the exam that you will sit. Now, the role play is unseen before you actually take the exam. You will, however, in the 12 minutes before the oral begins, be given the role play and the photo card, and you will have 12 minutes to prepare. You will be able to have one sheet of paper, and you can make notes on it during that time. And you're allowed to take that piece of paper into the oral exam with you. Obviously, this piece of paper will then be handed over to the teacher before the general conversation part of the oral begins. Now, it's very important that if you look on the screen at the instructions, you will see that dictionaries and other resources are not allowed during this 12-minute preparation time, okay? But you are allowed to make notes up to a maximum of one side of A4 paper, and that these will be taken away from you before the general conversation begins. Okay, so let's have a look at an example higher role play. Firstly, it's very, very important when you first get to the role play to look at how you must address the person. Because in the higher role play, you will have to ask 2 questions. And you can tell that you have to ask a question because there is a question mark by the bullet point. So on the one on the screen, for 4 and 5, you have to ask a question. This is really important because you need to know whether you need to ask the question in the tu form or in the vous form. So the first thing you need to do is check, are you going to be asking tu or vous? In the higher role play, you'll have to ask 2 questions. So if we look at the one on the screen, you have to formulate a question out of faire du sport and raison. So doing sport, why? So for example, you might say, tu fais du sport et pourquoi? And for the 5th one, tu aimes le football? Pourquoi? Or tu joues au foot? Pourquoi? You will also be asked a surprise question, and this is shown by the exclamation mark. Now, it will be within the topic area that's on your role play, but it's a surprise. So if you're not sure what the question is, simply ask me to repeat it. So for example, est-ce que vous pouvez répéter la question, s'il vous plaît? Or répétez, s'il vous plaît, if you prefer the shorter version. And then simply do your best to echo back the verb that I've used. The other 2 questions will be basically just using the present tense. They do say that they might get you to use the conditional, possibly at times, but it would be a very, very simple conditional, such as je voudrais un café, s'il vous plaît. I would like a coffee, please. So in this one on the screen, the premise of it is that you're at a leisure centre, and you are talking to a young person. So bullet point 1, per week, how many times you visit. So I will ask you in French, per week, how many times do you visit? And you will say something back like, oh, I go once a week. And then I will ask you, this leisure centre, why do you come here? And you might say, oh, it's near to my house, for example. What you can see on the screen now is something that you will not see during the actual exam. The teacher has to follow a very, very strict script for the role play. So this is the teacher card for the role play from the previous screen. So when we're at a leisure centre, this is a script that a teacher has to follow. We're not allowed to deviate from it at all. So for bullet point 1, whereas I'm going to ask you how many times you visit per week, I would have to say, if this was your role play, word for word, combien de fois par semaine viens-tu ici? Now, I'm allowed to repeat the question twice, but no more than that. So if you ask me for a 3rd time, I will simply have to move on. For the second question, the second bullet point, why do you choose this centre? Pourquoi aimes-tu venir ici? Once again, I have to phrase it in that precise way. I'm not allowed to change it even slightly. Then the 3rd one, I'm told what my surprise question is. In this case, it's dis-moi ce que tu as fait ce matin. Tell me what you did this morning. Now, the surprise question is very, 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 very likely to be a past tense question. So in this case, tell me what you did this morning. It says allow the candidate to say something they've done this morning. So it might be je suis allé au collège, I went to school. So it's worthwhile having pre-learned a few past tense verbs for this, which you can just easily manipulate. And then I, by my script, have to say, ah, c'est bien ça. Now, for the fourth one, where you ask the question, I have to allow you to ask me why you do sport, and I give an appropriate brief response. If you don't understand my response, don't worry. And then the fifth one, once again, you ask me a question, and the question on this role play was allow the candidate to ask your opinion of football. So, qu'est-ce que tu penses du foot? Once again, I give a quick appropriate answer, which I'll make up on the spot. So I might say something like, ah, j'adore le foot parce que c'est intéressant. But you don't have to understand what I've said in reply to you. Okay, so for the role play, there are 10 marks available. There are 5 bullet points on the role play card, and there are 2 marks up for grabs for each of them. If you look on the screen, you can see that you'll get per bullet point 0 out of 2 for no rewardable communication, if it's highly ambiguous what you say or the pronunciation prevents communication. You'll get 1 mark out of 2 if it's partially clear but with some ambiguity, but the pronunciation is sort of understandable. And finally, you'll get 2 out of 2 for each bullet point if it's clearly communicated, it's unambiguous, and you pronounce it sufficiently that I can understand it. So here's one final example. This is with a different role play. In this one, if you look at the top, it says vous êtes à la réception d'un hôtel en France. You are at a reception in a hotel in France. Vous parlez avec la réceptionniste. And it would have told you to use the vous form because you're talking to a receptionist. Now, we're just looking at one example bullet point. So the prompt on the student card was simply réservation chambre. So basically that's telling you need to try and reserve a room. So question 1, this is what I, as the teacher, would say to you. I'm playing the part of the receptionist. So I would say, je peux vous aider? Can I help you? Now, if you simply said to me, réservation, you get no marks because it's no reward or communication. There's no detail. You're just saying a random word to me. Similarly, if you just say une chambre, it's ambiguous. There's no verb. It's totally unclear that you want to book a room. You get 1 mark if you manage to say to me in response to je peux vous aider? Can I help you? Je réservais chambre. Now, it's ambiguous because you've basically said I reserved bedroom. It doesn't really make sense, but I would sort of understand what you were getting at. And also, if you said réserve une chambre, communication's partially clear, but again, it's a little bit lacking, but I would just about understand what you're getting at. You would get 2 out of 2 if you said, for example, je voudrais réserve une chambre. Now, this is interesting. You would get 2 marks out of 2 here, even though that utterance is not entirely perfect. It should be je voudrais réserver une chambre. I would like to reserve a room. But you'll get 2 out of 2 because it's close enough. And in the final option, c'est possible réserver une chambre? Again, it's clearly communicated despite the anglicised, and that means the English structure. What it really should say in French is c'est possible de réserver une chambre, but c'est possible réserver une chambre, basically they would understand. So you can get 2 out of 2 as long as the message is sufficiently clear. So it's very, very easy and doable to get full marks in the role play, even if you feel once you've completed it that you made some mistakes, okay? So don't panic. You can get full marks if you manage to communicate effectively with me.